Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here, and the Knicks have officially played their first game of the 2023-24 season. Was it a glorified G League game? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Thanks, Boston. Thanks, NBA, for giving the Celtics a back-to-back preseason game. But we've got all the takeaways from this game. Immanuel Quickley looking like he had some offseason gains. DiVincenzo getting his first action with the Knicks. Jericho Sims at power forward, just as we unfortunately predicted. Julius Randle looking great. RJ Barrett not shooting well, but having a really good game, and much more coming up in this episode of Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. And we want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube throughout this whole Knicks season, was just started today. We appreciate you guys making us a part of your daily routine, which hopefully we'll be doing for the next 7 months, if not longer. And if you're not already, make sure you hit the notification bell on YouTube or the auto download function on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. And if you want to take your connection with us one step further, you can connect with us on Subtext, where you can communicate with us as easily as just texting us on your phone. So check that out in the episode description if you're interested. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site The Strickland, which you can find at strict.land. And he's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And I am almost running out of breath, Gavin, but the Knicks won their first preseason game, 114-107 over the Boston Celtics. Unfortunately, thanks to the NBA scheduling Boston back-to-back preseason games, they sat every player worth anything on their team, basically, other than maybe Peyton Pritchard, who they just extended. And the Knicks got the win here. The Knicks certainly looked like it was their first preseason action, but throw it to you. Where should we start with this, nonetheless, first win for the Knicks?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my initial thought was it was just fun. I mean, kind of what we were saying on the show the other day. It was just fun seeing all the starters out there. They looked to kind of be in an immediate rhythm. There wasn't, I don't want to say they were coming out in playoff mode, because obviously that was kind of hard to do given the competition and given the stakes, but it felt like all the defensive rotations were really on point. I really liked how aggressive Julius Randle was, like attacking the basket straight from the get-go. Like he had two like plays where he could have basically like either taken a contested three or pulled up for a mid-range shot, and instead he was going all out to get to the rim. Like he had this absolutely nasty like pivot, then reverse pivot, then step through layup, had another one where he had a reverse spin layup over a double team. Like he was making every effort to get all the way to the rim. And I know he's noted, as you mentioned last show, that he didn't have a lot of time this offseason to necessarily work on his conditioning, but that didn't appear to be an issue for him at all. Maybe it comes out when he's playing more than 14 minutes, but I thought he was awesome. Brunson was super sharp in his first and only 6 minutes of this game, 4 for 5, 1 for 1 from 3, made a free throw, scored 10 quick points. It just looked like these guys were in a real rhythm. And Alex, I'll throw it to you for this, but Mitchell Robinson, like I think that might have been the thing I was most excited about coming out of this one. 10 points, 7 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals in 23 minutes, going up against once a Nick Ozanik, Luke Cornett. He looked about as spry and as athletic and moving as well as I've seen him since his second season.
Yeah, I think Mitch looks like he's maybe finally put it all together, like with his body and his conditioning and the right balance of strength versus springiness. I mean, last year, I think that he still sort of looked like he was lacking that springiness a little bit. And, you know, that's not like faulting him. He had an absolutely dominant season last year. And, you know, it's just you kind of yearned for those days of, oh, remember when you used to just be able to throw it up anywhere and Mitch could dunk it. And in this game, it started to feel more like that again, except for he was also getting those offensive rebounds like he gets. And just, I mean, the one that he got and just kind of snatched out of traffic and then just threw down and drew a foul, I thought was just so impressive. I mean, that one, like he hung on the rim a little bit for a little extra emphasis. Granted, he was doing it against guys that'll probably be on the bench or possibly in the G League this year. And yet, nonetheless, it's good to see him start off on a good foot. Maybe in a way, this was kind of good for the Knicks. Just give them a little easy matchup, an easy runway to get into this season, get into this preseason, and then a long layoff between now and the next game against the Timberwolves. So, it was great for Mitch. I also was super impressed with Immanuel Quickley. I thought that he looked really good. I mean, he talks every single year. He's one of the guys that, and I feel for the guy because he's built very thin. So it must be really, really hard for him to put on functional muscle. But he always talks every offseason about wanting to put on more muscle and get stronger to be able to, get inside better and all this other stuff. And for a guy that, his first year or two in the league that we were talking about, he sort of over relied on his floater a bit, to generate offense and, never really got all the way to the hoop, because it seemed like he was kind of afraid of that contact a little bit, which, it's hard to blame someone in their rookie year when they enter a new league where suddenly they're very small by comparison to their peers. But this game, I mean, he was heat seeking for contact. We're heat seeking for content. For
Not finding a lot of it
for contact. And he was finding it and made a couple really impressive baskets where he took a bump and then he wasn't even particularly close to the hoop and yet just found a way to contort his body in air and throw it up towards the hoop and finish. And that's awesome. I mean, if that's in his arsenal now with how good he's always been at drawing contact, if he's willing to just kind of start throwing his shoulder into guys, James Harden style, and just kind of create that contact and then find a way to finish anywhere within 7-8 feet of the hoop, it's going to be a real big year for him. And I mean, that was a large part of him contributing 21 points on, what was it, 8 of 14 shooting overall. I mean, it's just I thought a phenomenal game for him to open things up.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back on Mitch real quick before getting to IQ, because I thought it was kind of what I was talking about when we had our buddy DJ on the show last week with Mitch, but that ability to just mix it up a little bit defensively. Obviously, he's turned into such a dominant defender as a drop guy, 98% of the time, it feels like. But I wonder if this is a preview for what the Knicks are going to do in the regular season, or if it was Tibbs just kind of messing around, trying to see how different things look. But he was pressing up a little bit in the pick and roll, got a poke away early in the first quarter, blocked a Svi Mikhailuk 3, which I know that's the play, Alex, you and I were dying to get back from his first 2 years in the 3 and the first few years in the league. And then he ran the floor, got a big time jam in transition off of that. Brunson had this really nice play earlier where he spun through a double team and just lobbed it high to him. And Mitch got really far up in the air. And I was joking with DJ about Mitch's trainer was we did a bunch of pool workouts this summer. He can really jump again. And I was like, all right, well, I'll believe it when I see it. I saw it a little bit. He got higher than I thought he did at any point last year. I thought it was interesting that Wally mentioned that his legs looked a little bit thicker. And maybe that was an emphasis for Mitch to not just get beat up as often throughout the year, because after missing so many games early in his career last season, it felt like the bigger issue was that he would just play and he wouldn't be at quite 100%. And you would just see him have games where he'd fall 5, 6, 7 times. And you could see him almost, it's like a video game where they have the HP bar and you could see it going down over the course of the game. And he just wasn't the same guy. As far as Immanuel Quickley, I'm totally with you. He was, I thought initially, I was a little disappointed with how he played in his first stint coming in at 6 minutes left in the first quarter. I thought he looked a little bit indecisive, not very aggressive. And then he totally flipped it around in the second and third, attacking the basket, threw some great passes, had kind of the RJ classic where he gets into the lane and loops it under a big man's arm to Isaiah Hartenstein for the finish. Got inside the lane instead of Grimes for a 3, got inside the lane again, set up RJ for a 3. He missed one lob to Sims later in the game, but overall, really impressive effort for him. I loved once he got going in that third quarter, he took a pull-up 3 without making a pass in the half court, which normally you don't want your point guard doing. But man, I want Immanuel Quickley to be as aggressive as possible, getting up shots from distance. So I thought it was an awesome effort from him in his 2023-24 debut. I had to remember what year it was, but yeah, I'm excited about him.
I am too, and certainly excited for the whole team this year. And we got plenty more guys to talk about. Although maybe one thing I hate to keep bringing this up as a negative because I like the player, but Jericho Sims saw action at the 4 in the first sub of this game. Was not it gave me a little bit of the ick. I just thought that's not what I want to see this season. Josh Hart was out for the game, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Julius Randle looking real good. RJ Barrett, Jalen Brunson in his first action of the year. Very brief stint, looking good. And actually, maybe a little discussion about how the Knicks actually treated a preseason game like a preseason game for once. That was kind of nice. But first, I got to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. So get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using our code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. All right, and we're back in to continue talking about the Knicks' absolute domination over the extremely prepared and full rostered Boston Celtics in the first preseason game. It actually wasn't that. The Knicks look pretty rusty, but they did their thing. I think that all in all, one of my biggest takeaways, Gavin, was that the defense, and I mean, I'll give Julius Randle, I think, the most props on this. He's the guy that you most look for. We were just talking about in the preseason game 1, like predictions and whatever, that he's sort of one of those guys where the first preseason game is a big barometer for him. And the preseason has always sort of been this like easy way to tell what the coming year is going to bring for Julius Randle. And I thought this game was a great sign. I mean, he was engaged on defense. He was almost to a fault, like deferential on offense. I mean, like not in the passive aggressive way, like he was at times in the like
because
21.
He's done that.
Right. Like the 21-22 season, we saw that plenty,
Yeah.
where he would just be like that one game where he was like, I'm going to do nothing but shoot threes this whole game, or just pass it, because like clearly someone had told him before the game to shoot more threes or something. It wasn't anything like that. It didn't seem like there was any malice behind it. But I mean, for the first, I think it took him like 8 to 10 minutes to score his first bucket or something like that. And it came after a while, but it felt natural. Like he was just kind of moving the ball around. They were running the offense through RJ a lot early, but I don't know. I didn't have any like grand sweeping, things about Julius that like, oh, he looks like he worked on this more, other than just like being really impressed by how good his conditioning looked. But like he managed in the end 11 points in 13 minutes, but made it look really fluid. Like it didn't seem forced at all. And it didn't seem like he was going to ISOing too often or anything like that. Like he really played within the flow of everything. And I hope that's a sign of things to come, because I really like him in that role.
Yeah, he had it was in the first few minutes of the game. He had a play where he was double teamed and he just got the ball out of his hands quickly, and it led to a Brunson drive and finish. And I thought that was just pretty clearly an emphasis from Tom Thibodeau for the ball to move side to side and really not have extended touches unless you're named Jalen Brunson. And RJ might have violated that a time or two. And Randle had one where he had the ball poked away. By and large, the ball moved really well. Like give the Celtics credit. I thought they were scrambling really well defensively, and there were some plays where the Celtics won possessions and other plays where the Knicks were just able to get it out. And like whether it was Evan Fournier hitting like a shot clock buzzer beating 3 or someone getting a layup at the shot clock buzzer, like the Knicks really had to work to score, which you could say is a concern against the Celtics. It's not so much for me, just the backup Celtics, I should say, not so much for me just because it was the first preseason game. But I was really encouraged by that, and I hope that continues to balance out the isolation heavy nature of the offense. If it's not Jalen Brunson just trying to cook, I want the ball moving. I want everyone getting touches, and I think we saw that in RJ Barrett, who did not have a very good shooting game, but did kind of build off his playoffs last year in that he got to the line a bunch, was really good once he got there, right? 9 for 9 at the charity stripe. I saw a bunch of people joking on Twitter. I'd finally, in what is it, year 5 for RJ Barrett now? Year 4 for RJ Barrett now?
Year 5.
Year 5.
First year of his rookie extension.
Right. He's finally getting the benefit of the refs whistles. Whatever happened. Maybe you have to win an international medal of some kind to qualify. But he's getting some respect. 9 free throws, hit all of them, and got credited with 2 assists. But just repeatedly got into the lane, drew help, push the ball out. And that was really exciting. Like they ran this little pistol action for him early in the game. Mitch was diving to the rim. RJ got in quickly and just sprayed it out to Brunson for three. And that's kind of what we were talking about all offseason. If Jalen Brunson's going to score more this year, it's going to come from him doing self-created threes, but also from him getting more easy catch and shoot threes, because other guys on this team can create shots. And that was a really good example of it. So I was pretty encouraged by RJ. The shot you hope comes around. Obviously, that is always a concern with him. Would have been nice to see him hit a few more, but I thought it was a pretty good night for him all in all.
Yeah, I don't, and I don't even think that he was that far off from like Quentin Grimes, for example, who had sort of an off night too, and like Grimes, I don't think anyone would. I think people would be more likely to give Grimes the benefit of the doubt, and yet like 2 of 6 for Grimes, 1 of 6 for RJ. It's like neither of them shot particularly well. Grimes made one more three. Like I thought that RJ did a really good job of sort of doing what he did in the playoffs almost, which was not forcing it too much, like from three. Granted, he tied for the most attempts on the team. Or no, sorry, Fournier took 7, but out of everybody else that presumably will play minutes in real games this year, he tied for the most on the team with 5. But like I thought they did a good job of finding his way inside, and getting to the free throw line, which is huge. And then not just getting those free throw calls, but making them. And I mean, that was something that we saw manifest in the playoffs too. In particular, that I think it was the game 6 against Miami. I think it was their last game when he got like 10 free throw attempts in the first half or whatever it was, and made all
went 8 for 8, I think, in the first half,
or 8 for 8,
or maybe
maybe
the first quarter even. I got to look it up, but
yeah. It was a lot. I mean, he made a ton of free throws. He was reminiscent of that. Like if he can start hitting free throws and getting the calls, now that refs can, I guess, check his paycheck and make sure that he's paid like a high level NBA starter. I think the sky's the limit. This kind of was like proof positive that even if his jump shot isn't falling, he's starting to figure his game out in such a way that he's going to be able to make an impact on offense no matter what, which is great to see. I think my only critique, which you sort of touched on too, is he maybe let the ball stick to his hands a little too much compared to everybody else in that starting unit. So if he could just work on that and just keep it moving, if there's not like a perfect opportunity for him, then cool. But also if he lets it stick to his hands and he's consistently getting 7, 8 free throw attempts per game, it's going to be hard to fault him, because that's kind of one of the most like ideal outcomes you can get out of any possession in the NBA. So it would be pretty hard to fault him if that's what he's able to do this year.
Yeah, this is something I'm going to talk about on tomorrow's pod with Schwinn. But looking back at his playoff stats, like I think all offseason I was kind of preaching like, oh, well, his efficiency, like his field goal percentage was the same, his 3-point percentage was the same. So it didn't really shift that much from the playoffs to the regular season. But then his cleaning the glass is a shot attempt that obviously takes into account free throws as well. And that was way up from the regular season. I was like, oh, it's because he was getting the line more and shooting, I think 4% better when he got there. And that, again, when you add volume and you add even slightly improved efficiency, that makes a really big difference for a guy who is probably never going to be a great shooter from the field. Alex, I want to get into Dante DiVincenzo's Knicks debut next. And then we still have to talk about, depending on your perspective, the interesting experiment or travesty that was with Jericho Sims at power forward. So let's talk about that in just a sec on Locked On Knicks. All right, Dante DiVincenzo. A little bit of a slow start for Dante. Played 23 minutes, did not hit his first shot from the field until there were 4 minutes left in the third quarter. I thought, Alex, he was maybe a little bit passive, just trying to fit in with everyone. Like there were times where it kind of reminded me of Quickley at the start of last year, where he'd have semi-open threes, and he's like, I don't want everyone to think I'm a jerk. I'm gonna pass this up. I'm just gonna move the ball along. And then as the game went on, he got a little bit more comfortable. Hit a few big threes, showed off really nice chemistry with Isaiah Hartenstein, and had some nice flashes defensively as well. And generally, I think fit in really seamlessly, which is just about what we expected when they signed him away from Golden State.
Yeah, I mean, let me say first, like defensively, the lineup of Quickley, Grimes, and DiVincenzo, I mean, they were menaces out there. That was a fun little lineup to watch play for a few minutes.
We should note Sims and Mitch were the two bigs in that lineup. So really weird, but fun,
right,
especially on defense,
which made it that much harder to sort of judge them on offense, because you're like, if they had this much spacing out of one of those two big spots, maybe things could be different here. But defensively, I mean, those guys were just all over it. And I mean, props to every Knick that touched the floor. Like, they were all everywhere, in the passing lanes in this game. Like, that was probably my number one takeaway, is like, this is what you always get out of a Tibbs team. For all of his faults, like, these guys come out preseason game one just like chomping at the bit, ready to like punch you in the face on defense. And they certainly did that as a unit. But that threesome was fantastic between DiVincenzo, Quickley, and Grimes. But DiVincenzo himself, I mean, I just thought, there was a little bit of a nervous energy quality to him, like good and bad. I thought that he seemed really excited to be out there, and it seemed like he was just constant motion the entire game, just never stopped. He's always chasing someone or trying to run the floor or trying to, move around on offense, which I love to see. But then, there was definitely the jitters. I saw what you were talking about too. He seemed like he was kind of like trying to find his way, which is understandable. And that's why you have preseason. That's why you have training camp and practices and everything else to hammer all this out. I'll be really intrigued to see how he looks when the next game comes on Saturday against the Timberwolves. I think that'll be an interesting, test to see where he's at progress wise, as far as getting acclimated to his new teammates and everything. But, I think we got a pretty good taste of what he can bring to this team. One thing that also stood out to me was once or twice he did, one of them I think was on a break. But it still counts. I think he brought the ball down and did sort of initiate a little bit with Quickley out there. And it allowed Quickley to kind of move off the ball and get free to set himself up for, opportunities to like drive or to get open for a three or something like that. And that's something I hope we see more of. I think DiVincenzo, much like Josh Hart, I don't necessarily trust him to full on run the offense, but I certainly trust him to bring the ball down and get the ball in the right place to get things started. And so I hope that the Knicks utilize him in that way, because I think that's going to be a really good skill for him on that bench unit, where you can have, I think even more so than the starting unit, because to your point, they're going to want Brunson to have the ball in his hands all the time as the starter. But like that bench unit could have some really fun basketball where guys are just kind of whipping the ball around. Everybody can kind of handle it a little bit once Josh Hart gets in there at the 4. And I think things could be pretty fun with that, with DiVincenzo out there.
Look, I was begging just the other day for some minutes with Quickley, Grimes, DiVincenzo together. And right away you saw, like, even though I don't think they had a particularly good night collectively outside of Quickley, but you could see the potential of that group. And my favorite play from DiVincenzo the whole game was end of the third quarter. Had the ball with like a second left outside the arc, 2 guys around him, and out of the corner of his eye, saw Hartenstein cutting to the rim and was able to zip it in there. Hartenstein really smartly released it before like his hands got to the rim, so it would go in time. But it was just that intuition to make the extra pass, that willingness to make the extra pass. I think DiVincenzo's had that DNA going back to his Villanova days, and then it was probably even further cemented playing on Golden State, which obviously has treasured the extra pass and promoted the extra pass in a way we haven't seen in the NBA, maybe since the Suns teams or since the '80 Celtics. So he definitely has that quality to him, and it's something that I think Tibbs, to my earlier point, is trying to coach into this team. And it just helps to have as many guys as possible that are inclined that way. Hartenstein's inclined that way. Grimes is very much inclined that way. So it's cool to have another guy, because it can have an amplifying effect and kind of a contagious effect when guys are constantly making that extra pass. So I thought that was really cool, really exciting. Something that was a little bit less cool was Jericho Sims at power forward. It wasn't all bad. Like there were moments, I mean, and Wally was noting this on the MSG broadcast, where you just had awesome rim protection between him and Mitchell Robinson. That was a lot of fun. But the offense was man, just a clogged toilet mess. And Sims was trying to compensate for that by staying out behind the arc and crashing in when he wasn't guarded, which is good in theory, but he just has to have really strong hands for that to work, because a lot of times you're going to see situations, right, where the lane, like, because there's another center there, it's not wide open, it's already clogged. So there's going to be multiple defenders in the area. It has to be a really good pass. It has to be a pass with some pace on it, and he has to catch the ball. And twice he dropped it, cutting to the lane, or defender was able to get a hand in there. And that is my concern with those lineups, is if that's one area where you can weaponize him, because he is fast for a big guy, and he's obviously a great dunker once he catches the ball. he has to catch the ball to be able to dunk it. The one good thing that I saw that they did to take advantage of him out there was use him in a Draymond Green-esque way, which is what I think I was advocating for when he was playing power forward last year, which is like, look, if they're not going to guard him, just use him for dribble handoffs. It's what you see with Dre and Steph all the time, and it's why teams have to guard Draymond Green out on the perimeter, because if not, you're giving up an open three. And there's this really nice play where he had the ball on the perimeter. Quickley and Grimes ran this really nice impromptu off-ball action where Grimes just kind of did this little like split cut. Benji pointed this out on Twitter, so credit to him, and drew two defenders, quickly realized it and immediately just sprinted over to Sims for a handoff and a three. And that's a way you can weaponize it. But Alex, ultimately, I want to see as few minutes of Sims in at power forward as possible, because I don't think it'll be tenable against normal rotations.
Yeah, it's truly not a knock on Sims, who again, I must stress, like, I think will be a great third, maybe second string center his whole NBA. He'll have a long NBA career because he can rebound, he can, get vertical at the rim. He could do all the things you like out of a backup center, even if he's slightly imperfect at all those things. But the lack of being able to do anything on offense that isn't like the dunker center role it makes it not work. This lineup it's not going to work. I really hope that this was only a byproduct of, the fact that you only want to play Julius Randle a few minutes in this game to, because you're essentially facing a G League team on the other side, but also just like the fact that Josh Hart was out too. But I do think that sort of underscores a little bit the problem that this team might face during the season, where if one of those two is out for any given game, like, this is a lineup you kind of just almost by default have to go to, unless Tibbs is willing to just move RJ there. But then it's like, when does RJ get a rest at that point? Because he can't. I guess it would be when Randall comes back in, in that sort of scenario, or when Josh Hart would come back in, or whatever the case may be. I don't know, but like, it puts you in between a rock and a hard place if one of those guys happens to go down at all this year. But I totally agree with everything you said about the Sims stuff. Like, the overall ineptitude on offense when he's out there just can't be underscored enough. And the fact that he doesn't have the best hands, like getting to the rim. The one that really stood out to me with regards to that was, and this is when he had the better partner for him out there, in theory, if you had to pick one of the two centers on the Knicks to share the floor with him as the power forward, it would be Hartenstein, because at least Hartenstein can, kind of direct traffic from like the free throw line, which he did on this one particular play, and had the ball there and whipped it to a cutting Sims. And it was a good enough pass. I mean, it was in the window where Sims should have been able to just snatch it and go up, quick jump right from there and go up for a dunk, and couldn't get hands on it, couldn't handle it. And ultimately it was a turnover. So, it's just stuff like that where it's like, no matter how well you scheme this on offense, no matter how creative you try to get him looks, it's just not going to work. He's just not a 4. That's it. That's the end of the story. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. He just isn't. As far as other guys though, how about Evan Fournier getting 21 minutes? That was interesting. We sort of called that, I guess, when we were talking about the preseason predictions, although I don't know if I don't know. It's tough for me to gauge if this was something that would have happened if Josh Hart was playing, or if the Knicks would have gone a little more traditional with how they handle preseason games and treated it more like a dress rehearsal if that was the case. But clearly Tibbs was, and I mean, this is another thing we talk about, but like Tibbs was kind of actually on board with treating this like a preseason game for once, rather than just like, all right, guys, it's time for the 4-game regular season warm up. He actually played guys limited minutes, got just looks at things rather than, full on. Instead of painting a whole picture, he just did sketches, which is nice. Always good to have that. But Fournier got 21 minutes. He shot 3 of 7 from 3. I mean, that's cool. Hopefully he does enough over the course of these 4 preseason games to convince some team he still got it enough to have him be part of a trade package for someone, or just get the Knicks something in return for him and his relatively sizable contract. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I was thinking about it during the game. It just has to be the right contract coming back. Because like, look, like the Nuggets could, like, where he started his career, could use someone like him off the bench. It could use a little bit more bench scoring, but it's too much money. So it needs to be the right team. right situation, who knows? Maybe if the Clippers don't get James Harden, they say, yeah, we can talk ourselves in Evan Fournier, even though they have a million wings. So it's probably not the right fit, but you
Can you
get the
imagine
idea.
if they're just like, if you squint real hard, Evan
Yeah.
Fournier looks just like James Harden.
Yeah. He can,
Both got beards,
yeah,
I
he
mean,
just has
I
to
don't
grow
know.
it out a little bit more, and he'll be right there. I mean, I thought Fournier looked good though. I mean, he shot the ball really well. Him and Isaiah Hardenstein had awesome like Western European chemistry. Fournier had this like just nasty, Breen didn't really remark on it, I think, because the game was over at this point. But this like nasty behind the back pass that led Hardenstein perfectly to the basket. Hardenstein like earlier preemptively repaid the favor by hitting Fournier, and I don't even think Fournier knew he was open. And it was like a great quarterback where receivers just running, and all of a sudden the ball's like kind of in his hip pocket. And he hit him perfectly for a layup. Fournier in general was not Fournier. Hardenstein in general was dealing. Like he also had a really nice one to Deuce in transition that set up Fournier for three. Had another one where Deuce was kind of in the same position that Fournier was, and maybe didn't even realize he was open, but had good position. And Hardenstein just lofted it over the top. So that was really good. We haven't talked about Quentin Grimes yet. To your point, he had a little bit of a cold start, missed some shots that you'd want him to make. It does tend to take shooters a little bit of time to warm up in the preseason. I liked a couple different things I saw from Grimes. He had this really nice in and out escape dribble to dodge a closeout and then drain a three. And I think that, if I would imagine, is maybe one of the things he worked on with JJ Redick this summer, just different ways to get into a shot. And it doesn't have to be like speaking of a James Harden, like a crazy step back or like having a crazy bag to get into a step back. Like it can be really simple things like one dribble moves and footwork. And that was a good example of it from Grimes. Later in the game, had this really nice fake behind the back pass and then slipped it to Mitch. The one thing that was a little bit concerning was there was a play where I'm going to totally butcher this guy's name, but Namus Kita. I know I think he went to Utah State. I remember him from the draft. I know who he is. He was on the Kings, but I cannot say his name correctly. Absolutely shut down Grimes on an iso. And for like 30 seconds, I was sitting there. I was like, oh, this is a guy I was saying all last year should have gone at Duncan Robinson. I wanted him to be more explosive off the dribble. Like maybe he's just not that guy. And then I was like, oh yeah, Jericho Sims and Mitchell Robinson are on the floor. It's because he couldn't really just speed by him because there's three bigs in the lane. So we'll put a caveat, a major caveat on that. But I want to see Grimes continue to be more aggressive off the dribble, continue to be more aggressive, getting shots up throughout the preseason. But all in all, decent start for him. And Alex, a decent start for the Knicks as a whole.
Yeah, I think so too. And just give quick little shout outs like Deuce McBride, I thought also started a little rough.
Shot did not look good initially.
Shot did not look good.
Like side of the backboard, I think, on one.
Right. But directing the third unit on offense and whatever looked pretty good. Co-tied for the team lead in assists with Grimes, actually, who also had 4 assists. But all in all, not the best, not the worst showing from Deuce, but about what you would expect. And as usual, just kind of need the shot to start falling. Also, shout out to Jacob Toppin, who looks and moves so similar to Obi Toppin on the floor. It's bizarre. Obviously he's not as good as Obi Toppin. They're a very different class of player, but just like his build, his like way of moving, like the way that he was just immediately looking to go baseline and get a huge dunk, it just reminded me a lot of Obi. So I'm like, he might only be here for training camp and preseason, but at least it's not. It feels a little bit like Obi hasn't fully left just yet.
It's like a transition. Yeah, it's like if parents get divorced and like a mom says, "All right, this teddy bear's your dad now," and like, look, the teddy bear's not going to be there forever, but for the time being, it fills in. My parents may have done that with me. Anyways, but yeah, it was cool. I felt good for Mike Breen. Most of all, I was like, oh, this is good. Like he has like you could tell he was so happy shouting out Jacob Toppin doing something good. Like it was like a small bit of joy. It's like, oh great, I still have him in my life, but he clearly misses him. So I thought that was nice to ease our transition away from our beloved Obi Toppin.
Yeah. And speaking of the commentary team, for those of you wondering, they did mention on the broadcast that Clyde will be back for the weekend. So that's great. So
I thought, did you maybe, I realized after it wasn't because Breen isn't going to be on this game, but in the moment it felt like such a shot at Wally. It sounded like Mike was like, oh, and I get my buddy back this weekend, and then you don't have to be there anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly took it that way. So,
yeah. But he's not Breen. Apparently Bill Peto's calling that game. So that was, and I almost think Mike threw it in because he realized that's what it sounded like, but it just seemed like such a diss to Wally. He's like, I don't have to deal with you anymore after today.
Let me just say, I would probably take Wally over Mark Jackson, who's apparently coming in this year. So Is what it is.
Give it to Van
Anyway,
Gundy. Come on.
yeah,
Roy.
they
It's
could
not gonna
have.
happen, but
Van Gundy was right there. They could have just signed him instead. He's so much better.
maybe some
Anyway,
backup there. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all right. Well, this has been our preseason game 1 recap. Of course, we'll have you covered for all the rest of the preseason games, as well as some other great content. Schwinn and Gavin are going to be on tomorrow to talk RJ Barrett.
Yes.
And yeah, so we got that coming up and a bunch of other great stuff for you guys this week prior to the next preseason game, which is this weekend. And we'll have every preseason game for you guys covered and leading, of course, up to the regular season in a couple weeks. So till then, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Peace out, everybody.